Support for the Ripple Effects podcast comes from our friends at the U.S. Department of State, the sponsor of the National Clearinghouse on Disability and Exchange Project with Mobility International USA. Learn more about the Clearinghouse at miusa.org. Welcome to Ripple Effects, Travelers with Disabilities Abroad, a podcast brought to you by Mobility International USA, where we hear the powerful and vivid stories from people with disabilities going abroad and the positive impact these experiences have on shifting ideas for everyone of what is possible. For our first podcast series, we will hear from people who are blind or low vision as part of our Blind Abroad campaign from our National Clearinghouse on Disability and Exchange Project. We hope the heart of their stories resonates with you, the listeners, to empower more people with disabilities to go abroad. I'm Monica Malhotra, a project coordinator with Mobility International USA, and your host for Ripple Effects.
Colombia, te hiciste grande con el furor de tu historia.
Adriana Pulido, an aspiring musician and linguist from Colombia, had never left her country until she realized there was something else she wanted to achieve. She went from singing, playing the piano, and playing heavy metal one day to being one of the first people with a disability in Colombia to receive a Fulbright scholarship to pursue her graduate studies. She was accepted to the University of Florida in Gainesville to pursue her master's in mass communications, focusing on the social inclusion of people with disabilities in Colombia. Let's hear from Adriana as she tells us about applying for the Fulbright and how it impacted her personally and professionally. Hi, Adriana. Thank you for joining us today on this episode about your Fulbright experience in the United States.
Hi, Monica. Thank you very much for this invitation.
Before we kind of speak more specifically about your experience here, I want to hear what was life like before you even heard about the application and before you applied for the Fulbright scholarship. What were you up to in Colombia? Were you working, going to school?
Well, I had a normal life as a blind person. I had my family, I had friends, I had my boyfriend. And now I had also work on inclusion topics at the university where I studied my undergrad course in philology and languages. So I was kind of living a normal life, but I wanted to have new experiences.
And you were, I don't know, I remember we spoke before, but even outside of that, you were pretty heavily involved in music too. That was also a big part of you.
Oh, yes. I studied music since I was a child.
Uh-huh.
At the conservatory, I played the piano. I began when I was 9 years old or something.
Wow.
So I studied music at the same time with my elementary and high school.
Mm-hmm.
And it was great when I was at school because I was kind of the famous person, Everyone wanted to be with me, with the famous one,
So did you ever think about studying in the U.S. before you learned about the Fulbright opportunity?
Yes, definitely. It was something I wanted to do. Mm-hmm. And when I knew about this Fulbright scholarship, I said, well, this is a great opportunity to do it. And, also one of my main interests was to continue working for the inclusion of people with disabilities, not only in Colombia, but also in Latin America, hopefully. Mm-hmm. And, talking about Colombia, we're almost 3 million people with a disability. So there are a lot of things to do.
Mm-hmm.
And also, of course, I had some personal reasons. One of them is I wanted to improve my English, which was not bad, but could be better anyway. And also, I wanted to, of course, live new experiences, travel abroad, which was one of my biggest dreams.
Mm-hmm.
And I also wanted to kind of expand my knowledge.
Yeah.
In order to widen my, my view of the world of disability itself.
Mm-hmm.
So there are many, many reasons why I decided to apply.
Yeah, so many benefits.
definitely. Not only
Yeah,
for me, but also for people with disabilities. Hopefully.
exactly. Yes, yes, it will happen, and it does happen. So
Yes.
how was the application process whenever you started it? Did you find it smooth or challenging? How did that go for you?
Um, I took it seriously as almost, as a job, as my daily job.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not exaggerating when I say that I think I was the first person who started filling out the online application because I was looking at the website, early in the morning. Um, and I started. It was long. Um, I spent like 5 months doing that.
Oh, wow. Yep.
Like, doing everything and reviewing things and writing the essays, which
Mm-hmm.
was, one of the most important parts of the application.
Exactly.
So, and also because you have like two phases. So in the first one is like the first application you fill out, but then there's the application you fill out when you have been chosen
Mm-hmm.
as a Fulbright grantee.
Yep. Okay.
There's the second part, which is, you know, as long as the first one is kind of more complicated, is the
Mm-hmm.
moment where you have to decide which universities you really want to study in. And
Mm-hmm.
but anyway, yeah, it was a nice process
Yeah.
to fill out the application. It was accessible,
Mm-hmm.
so I didn't have like real difficulties in doing that.
Mm-hmm. What was your kind of initial cultural experiences whenever you got to the United States?
So at the beginning, I was a little bit afraid, but I was also overwhelmed
Mm-hmm.
by everything, impressed by everything, just getting used to listen to people speaking English everywhere,
Mm-hmm.
feeling how big was everything because everything is really, really big in the US.
Yes.
Um, I try to enjoy, after I let my fears just go away. I started like enjoying things.
We want to take this time to promote our hashtag Blind Abroad campaign, where our aim is to increase awareness to people who are blind or low vision on the benefits of going abroad, with a big thanks to our sponsors at the U.S. Department of State. You can learn more about the hashtag Blind Abroad campaign by going to our website, miusa.org, and also make sure to follow us on Twitter at mobilityintl and hashtag Blind Abroad. We'd love to see your comments and let others read your messages too. Did you experience kind of the cultural differences of having a disability in the United States and how you kind of navigated around versus how it was in Colombia for you?
Definitely. I have to say, I love the way you guys face disability. It's great.
Mm-hmm.
Because you see disability as a normal thing. I mean, having a disability in the US is like being tall or short or fat or thin, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of just one more feature you have,
Exactly.
but it's not an impairment.
Mm-hmm.
And something that I really like, which is different, in Colombia, it's very frequent to receive like unwanted help offers. Sometimes you are just walking at the street and people just grab your arm and take you and where you want to go. Don't worry, I'm okay, I'm doing great. But they kind of don't believe you. They want to, they kind of feel they have the obligation to help you because you are blind, because you have a disability.
Mm-hmm.
And it doesn't happen in the US.
Yeah.
In the US, they just ask me, "Do you need any help, or are you okay?" And I could say, "I'm okay, thank you."
Mm-hmm.
They don't really care if you have a disability. You have to fulfill the deadlines as the other students. You have to get your works done and your assignments done like with the same quality as those with disabilities.
Mm-hmm.
They expect much from you, and especially if they know you are a Fulbright scholar,
Hmm.
they're kind of demanding.
A
Yeah,
victim of your own success.
that's right.
Good. And did you receive your like accommodations pretty easily at the university whenever you arrived?
Yeah, they have this disability resource center,
Hmm.
and one of the first things for a blind student is to get instruction on orientation and mobility.
Hmm.
That's essential. That's critical.
Yeah.
So it was one of the first things we did at the university. I learned how to get to my classrooms, how to get to my office, how to get from my apartment to the shuttle that pick me up every day.
Mm-hmm.
So it's something that really helps you navigate in a very independent way.
And so you've been back in Colombia now for a few years. So looking back, how would you say that the Fulbright Scholarship and program benefited you personally and professionally?
Well, the Fulbright Scholarship changed my life, definitely. First of all, it let me be a better person. Um, I think I have a wider perspective of the world and of people from other countries. It was a great opportunity to learn about other cultures because it's different when you just watch TV and watch the news and movies
Mm-hmm.
because they are full of stereotypes.
Yeah.
But it's different when you just have the opportunity to face it in reality, in real life. You have the opportunity to really meet people and exchange ideas, and
Mm-hmm.
you know, and it's different when you see Americans in movies and when you know them in real life,
Mm-hmm.
and when you realize how kind they are to international students, for example. Um, I acquired the necessary knowledge to become a leader in disability topics in my country. So through readings and through my my graduate project was about accessibility to social network sites for blind and visually impaired people. And so I could kind of understand how people with disabilities are using social network sites like Facebook, Twitter, and some specific sites for people with disabilities. And and of course, I could work on accessibility issues, and I was also exposed to what the Ministry of Information and Communication Technologies was doing here, and so I kind of have had like the whole context, and I said, well, I have something I would like to work on when I go back to Colombia.
Mm-hmm.
So
That's great.
it was really, really worthy for me.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, especially now with, the hype of social media. So just making sure that all those different networks are accessible for all people. So that's a really interesting topic that you focused on already a few years ago.
Yeah, exactly.
Good. What kind of tips do you have for future international applicants that are thinking about applying for a Fulbright scholarship for their studies or research, or maybe they might have some hesitations? What are your tips for them?
First of all, work on your English.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, English is the essential part because sometimes people do not apply for the Fulbright scholarship because they don't know how to speak English correctly, and you have to have, a good level, good
Mm-hmm.
English level to face a master's degree or a PhD or whatever. Because you're gonna be reading and writing English all the time, so improve your English,
Yeah.
take classes, do the necessary things. The second thing is travel alone. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, it's kind of scary at the beginning, and sometimes you just wonder, oh my gosh, what am I doing?
Mm-hmm.
Why did I do this? But it's a great experience, and it's the only way to really find your personal skills, some skills that were probably hidden. because of your family probably overprotected you because you have a disability. So it's kind of the opportunity to discover who you are and to discover your ability to solve problems, because you're gonna have to solve problems.
Yeah.
And the other thing is just relax.
Mhm.
I mean, take it seriously. Take the application process seriously. Be disciplined to fill out the online application. Ask as many questions as you have to ask, just to make sure that everything's going right. Um, Read a lot. Read about your topic. Read other examples of, for example, statement of purpose, which is like the most important essay on the application. Is this essay where you say, where you explain the reasons why you want to study in the US, and what you're going to do when you come back to your home country. It has to be absolutely clear. So read a lot, be disciplined, but also relax. I mean, if you go to the interview and they don't choose you like the first time, you're going to have 1,000 times to try it again. So just enjoy.
Yeah, perfect. That's great. Thank you, Adriana. And this has really been great to hear your experience and your tips for other international students that might be interested in this really wonderful opportunity that has truly benefited you to continue work that you already started before you received the scholarship, and just kind of gives you more skills and personal gain from your experience here in Florida. And so I'd like to end with your ripple effect message that you would like to share with the listeners and for them to share with other people.
All right, my message is studying abroad lets you see the world, because even if we are blind, we can see. We can see the world in other ways. We can see people in other ways. We can change our perspectives. So just take the opportunity and go ahead and do it.
Thank you so much for your time and being part of our Blind Abroad series for the Ripple Effects podcast. I really appreciate this. I'm Monica Malhotra, your host for Ripple Effects, Travelers with Disabilities Abroad. Thank you for listening, and make sure to visit us at miusa.org to learn more about Mobility International USA and our mission to advance disability rights and leadership globally.